A millionaire CEO's world crumbled when his black nanny did the unthinkable, and what happened next will shake you to your core. Have you ever lost someone so important that even your children couldn't sleep at night? Picture this. You're standing in a $20 million penthouse, surrounded by every luxury money can buy, yet your 8-year-old twins haven't slept through the night in 6 months. Their tiny bodies shake with exhaustion, their eyes hollow from grief, so deep it defies their young age. This is the reality that was slowly killing Alaric Vaughn and his children, Cashin and Alara. But here's what nobody talks about when tragedy strikes wealthy families. Money becomes meaningless when your children are drowning in sorrow. Alaric had tried everything. Sleep specialists charging $500 per hour. Therapists with waiting lists longer than luxury car dealerships. Meditation apps. White noise machines. Even flying a renowned child psychologist from Switzerland. Nothing worked. Every night at 3 a.m., Alaric would find himself pacing the marble floors of his penthouse, listening to his twins' muffled sobs echoing through walls that cost more than most people's homes. Cashin, once a whirlwind of laughter, now sat motionless for hours, building the same robot over and over, searching for something that made sense. Alara, his sensitive artist, had stopped drawing entirely. Her last sketch was of 3 stick figures, with one crossed out in black crayon. The problem with grief? It doesn't care about your bank account. It doesn't respect your business empire or your penthouse view. When it invades a family, it becomes a silent destroyer, eating away at the foundation until everything you built threatens to collapse. And that's exactly what was happening to the Vaughns. Alaric's billion-dollar tech company was suffering because he couldn't focus. Board meetings became torture sessions where he'd zone out, thinking about his children's pain. His assistant had started making excuses for his erratic behavior. Investors whispered concerns about his leadership. But the real tragedy wasn't his crumbling business empire. It was watching his children fade away like shadows of their former selves. The twins had developed this heartbreaking ritual. Every night, they'd crawl into what used to be their parents' bed, clutching their mother's pillow, waiting for a warmth that would never return. Alaric would find them there, curled up like broken birds, their small faces wet with silent tears. 6 months of this. 6 months of watching his children disappear before his eyes while he stood powerless, despite having enough money to buy entire city blocks. Then everything changed when Zariah Monroe walked through his door. But what she did to heal his children, what she did that one crucial night when desperation reached its peak, it was so shocking, so completely unthinkable, that it would challenge everything you believe about professional boundaries, about healing, and about what people will do when love and desperation collide. If you believe broken families deserve healing, if you think children shouldn't suffer for adult failures, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear will either inspire you or leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about human connection. The woman who saved this family didn't use conventional methods. She didn't rely on textbook psychology or expensive treatments. What she did was raw, instinctual, and so controversial that it could have destroyed her career instantly. But it worked. And the consequences of that one unthinkable night would transform not just the children, but ignite a forbidden passion that would consume everyone involved. This is their story. The 47th floor of Manhattan's most exclusive residential tower housed a contradiction that would break your heart. Step off the private elevator into Alaric Vaughn's penthouse, and you'd see perfection. Italian marble floors so pristine, they reflected the crystal chandeliers above. Floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a God's-eye view of Central Park. Art pieces worth more than suburban mansions, hanging on walls that had never heard genuine laughter. But look closer. See that $50,000 leather sofa? It's positioned at the exact angle where Alaric can watch his children's bedroom door while pretending to work on his laptop. Those custom-built shelves displaying rare first editions? Half the books are children's stories about families reuniting. Purchases made at 2 a.m. during desperate Amazon searches for anything that might help. The kitchen island, designed for entertaining dozens, now serves as a battlefield of untouched meals. Alaric's housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, prepares elaborate dinners that go cold because the twins pick at their food like wounded animals, too grief-stricken to eat. Walk down the hallway toward the children's wing, and you'll notice something chilling: the silence. In a home designed for a thriving family, every footstep echoes like a funeral march. Cashin's room tells the story of a boy trying to rebuild his shattered world, one plastic piece at a time. Robot parts cover every surface: arms, legs, heads, torsos, but never complete figures. He builds frantically during the day, then destroys everything before bed, as a completion would somehow make his mother's absence final. "Daddy, if I build her a robot body, can Mommy come back?" he asked one morning, holding up a silver torso piece. Alaric's response, a choked sob disguised as clearing his throat, said everything. 3 doors down, Ilara's art studio presents an even more heartbreaking scene. Canvases line the walls, but they're all blank now. Her easel stands empty, brushes dried and abandoned in jars that once bubbled with creative energy. The last painting she completed sits face down on her desk, a family portrait where she'd painted herself in Cashin in vivid colors, but left the space where their parents should be completely white. "Colors are too loud now, Daddy," she whispered when Alaric found her staring at the blank canvases. "Everything hurts my eyes." The master bedroom had become Alaric's prison. Lila's perfume still lingered on her pillow. Her coffee mug remained on the nightstand, a brown ring staining the expensive oak. He couldn't bring himself to clean it, because that would mean accepting she was never coming back. Every night, the same ritual of torture began at 9 p.m. Alaric would tuck the twins into their beds, reading stories in a voice that cracked with exhaustion. But within hours, he'd hear it. The soft patter of bare feet on marble, the whispered conversations between 2 children trying to comfort each other. "Maybe Mommy got lost," Cashin would say. "Maybe she's trying to find us." "She's not lost," Ilara would reply, wise beyond her years. "She's just gone." Then came the screaming, not the tantrums of spoiled children, but the primal wails of souls in agony. Cashin would thrash in his bed, calling for his mother until his voice went hoarse. Ilara would curl into a ball, silent tears streaming down her face as she rocked herself for comfort. Alaric would burst into their room, gathering them into his arms, but his touch brought little solace. How do you comfort children when you're drowning in the same ocean of grief? The penthouse's smart home system recorded everything. Motion sensors tracked the twins' restless wandering. Sleep monitors showed they averaged 3 hours per night. The air filtration system couldn't cleanse a heaviness that saturated every room. By December, Alaric's business partners staged an intervention. "You're losing it, man," his closest friend Marcus had said during a video call. "The kids need professional help. Real help." But here's what nobody understood. Alaric had tried everything money could buy. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, child psychologist to celebrity families, charged $800 per session to tell him his children needed time to process. The Serenity Sleep Center offered $15,000 programs that failed spectacularly. Even flying in Dr. Klaus Weber from Geneva, a man who'd supposedly helped European royalty through similar trauma, yielded nothing but more theories and higher bills. The truth? His children were dying inside, and all his billions couldn't buy back their mother or restore their shattered innocence. But everything changed when SHE walked through that door on that rain-soaked Thursday morning, carrying secrets that would either save his family or destroy everything he thought he knew about healing boundaries and the lengths people will go to protect the ones they love. Zariah Monroe stepped out of the elevator at exactly 9:47 a.m., but she wasn't what Alaric expected. The employment agency had sent him a dozen candidates over 6 months, prim British nannies with sterling references, stern German women with child psychology degrees, even a former White House child care specialist. All had failed spectacularly. But Z? She shattered every preconceived notion the moment she entered his world. Standing 5'7" in burgundy leather boots that clicked against his marble floor with confident precision, she carried herself like someone who'd survived storms that would break most people. Her natural hair formed a crown of thick curls that caught the morning light streaming through his floor-to-ceiling windows. Gold hoop earrings caught the light as she turned her head, surveying his penthouse with eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Vaughn," she said, extending a hand adorned with rings that told stories, a vintage piece from her grandmother, a silver band from her travels to Morocco, a simple gold ring she bought herself after her first major triumph. Her handshake was firm, lasting exactly 3 seconds longer than professional courtesy required. "Ms. Monroe," Alaric replied, but his voice caught slightly. He conducted thousands of business meetings, negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Yet this woman's presence filled his penthouse in a way that made him hyper-aware of every breath. "I understand your children are struggling," she said, setting down a worn leather messenger bag that had clearly traveled the world. "Tell me about them. Not their problems, them. Who are they when they're not grieving?" The question caught him off guard. Every other candidate had immediately launched into methodologies, credentials, treatment plans. Z wanted to know about his children's souls. Cashin was, he could make anyone laugh. He'd build these elaborate scenarios with his toys, complete with voices and backstories. Ilara, she sees beauty everywhere, or used to. She'd paint sunsets that looked more real than the actual sky. Z nodded, but her eyes were studying the space around them. She noticed a family photo's position where Alaric could see them from every angle. The way the living room furniture was arranged to provide clear sight lines to the children's wing. The subtle childproofing that remained despite the kids being 8. Evidence of a father terrified of losing anyone else. "And you?" she asked. "Who are you when you're not trying to fix everything?" The question hit like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had asked about him? Not his capabilities as a provider or CEO, but who he was as a human being. Before he could answer, 2 small figures appeared in the doorway. Cashin emerged first, suspicious eyes scanning this new stranger who dared enter their sanctuary of sorrow. His pajamas hung loose on his thin frame, and his hair stuck up at angles that suggested another sleepless night. Behind him, Ilara peeked around the corner, clutching a stuffed elephant that had once been white, but now bore the gray stains of too many tears. Most adults would have immediately crouched down, adopted that sing-song voice reserved for children, perhaps offered candy or toys. Z remained standing, studying them with the same intense focus she'd given their father. "You're the robot builder," she said to Cashin, matter of fact. "And you're the artist who paints feelings." Both children froze. No one had acknowledged their identities beyond their grief in months. "How did you know?" Cashin asked, stepping forward despite himself. "Your hands," Z replied. "Robot builders have specific calluses from tiny screws and plastic edges. Artists have paint under their nails, even when they haven't painted in weeks." She pointed to barely visible traces of blue beneath Ilara's fingernails. "That's ultramarine. Expensive pigment. Your dad bought you professional supplies." Ilara's eyes widened. This stranger saw details everyone else missed. "Can you fix us?" Cashin asked with devastating directness. "Can you fix yourself?" Z countered. "Because healing isn't something someone does to you. It's something you choose to do with help from people who understand your particular kind of broken." Alaric felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. This wasn't a typical interview. Z wasn't selling herself as a solution. She was presenting herself as a partner in whatever battle lay ahead. "What makes you different from everyone else we've tried?" Alaric asked. Z's smile held secrets. "I don't believe in fixing broken things. I believe in helping them become something new. Sometimes the cracks are where the light gets in." She moved toward the windows, and Alaric found himself watching the way light played across her skin, the graceful strength in her movements. This woman radiated an energy that made his sterile penthouse feel alive for the first time in months. "My previous family," she continued, "the father was a senator whose son hadn't spoken in 2 years after witnessing a car accident. Traditional therapy failed. Medication failed. Everyone said he might never recover." "What happened?" Ilara whispered. We built a language that didn't require words. Movement, music, touch, ways of communicating that bypasses trauma. He started speaking again, but more importantly, he started laughing. Comment below if you've ever felt an instant connection with someone you shouldn't, because what was happening in that penthouse transcended professional boundaries and moved into territory that would either save this family or consume everyone involved. Alaric realized he was holding his breath, caught between desperate hope and something far more dangerous, an attraction to this woman that threatened to complicate everything. 3 weeks after Z's arrival, the Vaughn penthouse had become a war zone between hope and despair. During daylight hours, she worked miracles. Cashin had completed his first robot in months, a small figure with articulated arms that he'd painted bright yellow. Ilera had picked up a paintbrush for the first time since her mother's death, creating tentative strokes of color on canvas. Alaric found himself rushing home from board meetings, eager to witness these small victories. But night remained their enemy. Despite Z's innovations, storytelling sessions, breathing exercises, even sleeping under a tent of fairy lights she'd strung in their room, the twins still jolted awake screaming at 3 a.m. The penthouse's smart home system recorded their vitals. Elevated heart rates, cortisol levels that spiked like fever charts, sleep cycles that never reached the deep rest their growing minds acquired. On the night, everything changed. A February storm hammered Manhattan with ice and wind that made the penthouse windows shudder. The weather seemed to amplify the children's distress, as if nature itself was attacking their fragile progress. Alaric paced his home office, drowning in quarterly reports while his children's muffled sobs echoed through the walls. At 2:47 a.m., Cashin's screams reached a pitch that made his father's chest tighten with panic. He found Z already in their room, but this time was different. Instead of her usual calm professionalism, her shoulders were rigid with frustration. Sweat beaded her forehead despite the room's perfect climate control. Both children were inconsolable, Cashin thrashing against his sheets while Ilera rocked back and forth, making a keening sound that barely seemed human. "Nothing's working," Z whispered, her voice cracking. "I've tried everything I know." This was her breaking point. 3 weeks of watching these children suffer had worn through her professional armor, exposing the raw humanity beneath. What happened next would haunt Alaric's dreams for months. Z sat on the floor between their beds, pulled her knees to her chest, and began to cry. Not the gentle tears of sympathy, but the ugly, broken sobs of someone reliving their own trauma. Her whole body shook as she spoke between gasps. "When I was 7, my mama died in a car accident. Just like your mama got sick and went away. And you know what? Nobody told me it was okay to be angry. Nobody said I could hate God, or hate her for leaving, or hate myself for not being enough to make her stay." Cashin stopped thrashing. Ilera's rocking slowed. "I used to lay in my bed in Brooklyn, listening to my grandmother cry in the next room, and I thought if I was just better, smarter, more lovable, maybe Mama would come back. Maybe I could trade places with her." Z's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the room. "So I'm going to tell you something no grown-up ever told me. It's okay to be furious. It's okay to hate that your mama left. It's okay to be so angry you want to break everything beautiful, because how dare the world keep being pretty when your heart is bleeding?" She stood slowly, tears streaming down her face, and moved to Cashin's bed. "Can I hold you while we're angry together?" This was the unthinkable moment. Professional boundaries dictated distance, clinical detachment, evidence-based interventions. But Z threw away the rule book and offered the one thing these children needed most: permission to feel everything, held safely by someone who understood their particular brand of devastation. Cashin nodded, and she gathered him into her arms. But here's where it became truly shocking. She didn't offer comfort. Instead, she helped him rage. "Hit the pillow," she instructed. "Hit it like you're hitting the unfairness that took your mama away." Cashin's small fists pounded the pillow, while Z held him steady, her own tears mixing with his. "Scream if you need to. This room can hold all your anger." His scream was primal, months of bottled fury erupting like a volcano. But instead of trying to calm him, Z screamed too, for her own mother, for the unfairness of loss, for every child who'd ever been told to be strong when they needed to fall apart. Zariah watched this display of raw emotion with wide eyes, then quietly climbed from her bed and joined them. "I'm angry that Mama's paintings smell different now," she whispered. "I'm angry that she promised to teach me about color mixing, and now I have to learn alone." "Yes," Z said fiercely. "Be angry about that. You should be." For 20 minutes, the three of them sat on that bedroom floor, not trying to fix anything, not searching for silver linings or life lessons, just acknowledging that sometimes life breaks people and that's not okay. Then something extraordinary happened. The storm outside began to calm, and so did the children, not because their pain was gone, but because it had been witnessed, held, and validated by someone who refused to minimize their experience. "I'm tired now," Cashin said, his voice hoarse but peaceful. "Real tired," Zariah echoed. Z tucked them back into their beds. But this time she didn't leave. She sat in the chair between them, her hand reaching out to touch each child's forehead, a connection that said, "You're not alone in this darkness." Within minutes, both children fell into deep, dreamless sleep. Alaric had watched the entire scene from the doorway, frozen by what he'd witnessed. This woman had broken every rule he'd been taught about appropriate caregiver behavior. She'd shared her own trauma, encouraged his children's anger, and created intimacy that transcended professional relationships. It was unthinkable. It was brilliant. It was the moment he realized he was falling in love with someone who could save his family and potentially destroy his carefully ordered world. When he finally noticed him standing there, her eyes were red-rimmed but luminous with something he hadn't seen in months. Hope. "They'll sleep now," she whispered. "How did you know to do that?" he asked. Her smile was sad and knowing, because sometimes the only way out is through, and sometimes you need someone to walk through hell with you instead of trying to pull you around it. The space between them crackled with new energy. Grief transformed into connection. Professional boundaries blur beyond recognition, and the dangerous recognition that what had just happened changed everything. The children's soft breathing filled the silence as Alaric and Z stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of what had just transpired hanging between them like a live wire. "Coffee," Alaric whispered. Though it was nearly 4 a.m., Z nodded, following him to the penthouse's shadowed corridors to the kitchen. The city sprawled below them, windows twinkling like scattered diamonds, but neither noticed a view that usually commanded attention. Alaric's hand shook slightly as he operated the espresso machine, a $15,000 Italian masterpiece that suddenly felt absurd given the raw humanity they'd just witnessed. The mechanical were seemed too loud in the intimate quiet. "2 sugars," Z said softly, settling onto a bar stool. She'd kicked off her shoes, and something about her bare feet on the marble made the space feel less like a showroom and more like a home. "How did you know?" Alaric asked, sliding the cup across the island. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and both felt the electric jolt that had nothing to do with static. Know what? That they needed permission to break apart before they could heal. Z wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, studying the foam art his machine had created. "Because nobody gave you that permission. I spent 15 years trying to be perfect enough to deserve love, strong enough to never need help. It nearly destroyed me." She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "Your children aren't broken, Alaric. They're human beings processing impossible loss. The world keeps telling them to bounce back, to find closure, to be grateful for what they still have. But sometimes you need to honor what's gone before you can embrace what remains." The way she said his name, not Mr. Vaughn, but Alaric, sent heat spreading through his chest. "Tell me about your marriage," she said. The request should have felt intrusive, but something in her tone made it feel necessary, like lancing a wound to prevent infection. "Lila was..." He paused, searching for words that felt honest rather than reverent. "She made everything softer. I built this empire by being ruthless, calculating every move, but she helped me remember why any of it mattered. She'd dance in the kitchen while making pancakes, leave love notes in my briefcase, turn board meetings into family game nights by showing up with the kids and takeout. His voice cracked on the last word. She died believing I'd be fine because I'm strong. But strength without her felt like walking around with half my soul missing. Z reached across the marble island, her fingertips tracing the edge of his hand. Strength isn't about not breaking. It's about choosing to rebuild even when the blueprints are destroyed. What about you? Alaric asked. What brought you to caring for other people's children instead of having your own? Her smile turned bitter. I was engaged once. Marcus Williams, investment banker, beautiful brownstone and Park Slope. 5-year plan that included 2 kids and a golden retriever. She pulled her hand back, wrapping both arms around herself. 3 weeks before a wedding, I found him in our bed with a secretary. Classic story, right? But what broke me wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I had spent 2 years trying to become the woman he wanted instead of being who I was. I'd smoothed away every rough edge, every strong opinion, every part of myself that might inconvenience his vision of the perfect wife. That's his loss, Alaric said, and meant it. Maybe, but it taught me something valuable. I'd rather be alone and authentic than partnered and diminished. The kitchen fell silent except for the soft hum of expensive appliances. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the penthouse in shades of gold and pink, but neither of them moved to turn on lights. Can I tell you something that might make you fire me? Z asked. Alaric's pulse quickened. Yes. Watching you with your children, seeing how you love them even when you don't know how to fix them, it's the most attractive thing I've ever witnessed. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Z, Alaric started, but she held up her hand. I know the rules. I know this complicates everything. I know you're my employer and I'm your employee, and there are a dozen reasons this is impossible. She stood from the bar stool, moving around the island until only 2 feet separated them. But I also know that what happened in that bedroom tonight changed us both. Alaric felt his carefully maintained control fracturing. You're right. It did. So what do we do about it? The question pierced through his defenses. Here was this incredible woman who just worked magic with his children, who saw through his armor to the man underneath, who made his sterile penthouse feel alive again. I don't know, he admitted, but I know I can't pretend I don't feel this. Z stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something warm and complex that reminded him of spices and summer rain. Feel what exactly? Like I've been holding my breath for months, and you're the first person who makes me want to breathe again. The space between them crackled with possibility and danger. If you don't support families finding love after loss, if you think grief should keep people isolated forever, keep scrolling. But if you believe that sometimes the most beautiful connections emerge from the deepest pain, you need to hear what happened next. Because what Alaric and Z were about to do would either heal this broken family completely or shatter it beyond repair. The 2 feet of space between them felt like an ocean and an inch simultaneously. Alaric's eyes searched Z's face, looking for hesitation, for any sign that this moment was one-sided. Instead, he found a mirror of his own longing, months of grief and isolation crystallizing into desperate need for human connection. We shouldn't, he whispered, even as his hand rose to trace the curve of her cheek. I know, she breathed, leaning into his touch, but I've spent my whole life doing what I should. Maybe it's time to do what feels right. The first kiss was tentative, questioning, a conversation conducted in whispers against each other's lips. But when Z's fingers tangled in his hair, when she pressed closer with a soft sound that made his chest tighten, restraint shattered like glass hitting concrete. Alaric's hands found her waist, pulling her against him as months of suppressed longing exploded into desperate hunger. Her back met the kitchen island, and she gasped as a cold marble contrasted with the heat radiating between them. Z, he murmured against her throat, his voice rough with want. Are you sure? Her answer came in the form of her hand sliding beneath his shirt, fingertips tracing the tension he carried in his shoulders, the proof of sleepless nights and impossible burdens. I've never been more sure of anything, she whispered. He lifted her onto the marble surface, stepping between her knees as her legs wrapped around his waist. The kitchen transformed from a sterile showcase into their private sanctuary, illuminated only by the soft glow of dawn breaking over Manhattan. Their movement became a dance of discovery, hands mapping unfamiliar territory, lips exploring a landscape of neck and collarbone, breath mingling in shared gasps that echoed through the vast space. Z's fingers worked the buttons of his shirt with deliberate slowness, her touch leaving trails of fire across his chest. Each piece of fabric that fell away was like shedding armor, exposing vulnerabilities that neither had shared with another soul. "You're beautiful," she murmured, pressing kisses to the hollow of his throat, tasting salt and something uniquely him. Alaric's response was wordless, his hand sliding up her thighs, fingers tracing patterns that made her arch against him. The silk of her dress whispered as it pulled around her waist, and he paused to memorize this moment. Her hair wild around her shoulders, lips swollen from his kisses, eyes dark with desire that matched his own. They moved together with increasing urgency. Two people who had been starving for touch, for connection, for the reminder that they were alive and whole and capable of feeling more than grief. When Z's head fell back in surrender, when her fingers dug into his shoulders as waves of sensation crashed over them both, Alaric felt something inside his chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming, like a flower that had been waiting through winter for the first touch of spring sun. Their joining was both gentle and fierce, tender and demanding. Years of loneliness dissolved in the space between heartbeats, replaced by a connection that transcended the physical. This wasn't just attraction or convenience. It was recognition. Two damaged souls finding completeness in each other's brokenness. Z's soft cries mixed with his deeper groans, creating a symphony that filled the penthouse with life it hadn't known in months. Every touch was both answer and question, every kiss a promise and a risk. When the waves finally subsided, leaving them breathing hard against each other, the magnitude of what they'd done settled around them like morning mist. Alaric rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the charged space between them. "What are we done?" he whispered, though his arms tightened around her, unwilling to let her go. "Something necessary," Z replied, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Something that's been building since the moment I walked into your life." But as the sun climbed higher, reality began to intrude. The sound of small feet padding across marble made them both freeze. "Daddy?" Cashin's sleepy voice carried from the hallway. "Is everything okay?" "I heard sounds." They separated quickly, Alaric helping Z down from the counter as they scrambled to reassemble their clothes and composure. The transition from passionate lovers to employer and employee happened in seconds, but the lingering heat between them was impossible to disguise. "Everything's fine, buddy," Alaric called, his voice only slightly hoarse. "Z and I were just talking about your progress." Cashin appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair sticking up at impossible angles, clutching his favorite robot. His sleepy eyes moved between them, taking in their rumpled clothes and flushed faces with the uncomfortable perceptiveness of children. "You look different," he observed. "Different how?" Z asked, her voice carefully neutral despite the way her hands shook as she smoothed her dress. "Happy different. Like when Mommy used to make you smile, Daddy." The innocent observation hit like a physical blow, reminding them both that their actions had consequences far beyond their own hearts. The morning after had arrived, bringing with it questions that would reshape everything they thought they knew about their relationship, their boundaries, and their future. Cashin's innocent words hung in the air like a benediction, and in that moment, Alaric realized the son was right. For the first time in 8 months, he did look different. The perpetual tension that had carved lines around his eyes had softened. His shoulders, which had carried the weight of impossible grief, no longer hunched with defeat. "You slept through the night," Z observed, kneeling to Cashin's eye level. "How do you feel?" "Like my dreams didn't hurt," he said simply, then padded to the refrigerator and began assembling ingredients for cereal, a normal childhood act that would have been impossible weeks ago. 3 months later, the Vaughn penthouse had transformed into something unrecognizable. Ilara's artwork covered the refrigerator again, But these paintings blaze with color, vivid sunsets, laughing faces, a family portrait that included 4 figures instead of 3. Her latest masterpiece showed a woman with golden brown skin teaching 2 children to paint, while a man in a business suit watched with wonder. "That's you teaching us to see colors again," she explained to Z, pointing to the canvas with paint-stained fingers that no longer trembled. Cashin had graduated from destroying his robots to creating elaborate scenarios where they rescued families, built bridges, and solved impossible problems. His latest creation was a robot family. 2 small figures protected by larger ones, all connected by invisible threads he'd drawn in silver marker. "Robots don't replace people," he told his father during one of their evening talks. "But they can help you remember that families can be built in lots of different ways." Alaric's transformation was the most dramatic. Board meetings that once consumed 14-hour days now ended promptly at 6. He'd learned to delegate, to trust, to prioritize presence over profit. His colleagues noticed a change, decisions made with surprising warmth, leadership that inspired rather than intimidated. "You're different," his business partner Marcus observed during a video call. "It's like you remember what you're working for." "I do," Alaric replied, glancing at a photo on his desk. Not just Lila anymore, but their current family constellation. Him, Z, and the twins at Central Park, covered in paint from one of Lara's outdoor art sessions. Z had found something she'd searched for her entire life, a place where her strength was valued, her intuition trusted, her love reciprocated without conditions or expectations. She'd stopped looking over her shoulder for the moment someone would decide she wasn't enough. The children called her Z-Mama now, a title that had evolved naturally from bedtime stories and scrape-knee comfort. She'd never replace Lila. That wasn't the goal. Instead, she'd helped them expand their definition of family to include new forms of love. On quiet Sunday mornings, they'd found their rhythm. Alaric making coffee while Z helped the twins with art projects. Cashin's laughter echoing through rooms that had once held only silence. Ilara humming while she painted, her voice clear and joyful. The unthinkable had become their normal, a love story born from grief, a family rebuilt from fragments, a woman who dared to break every rule to heal broken hearts. Subscribe if you believe love conquers all. If you think families can be created through choice as much as circumstance, if you know that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow from the richest soil, the kind that's been broken down and rebuilt with tears, courage, and the audacity to hope again, this is proof that healing isn't about returning to what was, but about having the courage to build something new